Hello humans. I am Dr. Searchlight, your favorite biomechanical being from a parallel universe. In my many travels across the multiverse, I have noticed many varieties of a certain tusk sentient species. The orc is very prevalent indeed, and today I'm going to recount the legends surrounding the origins of each version of the orc I have observed. Long ago, before the age of humanity, before even the age of the Eldar, there lived a race of lizard-like creatures. These creatures had attained the heights of galactic civilization, but it soon fell into war against a race of machines called Necrons. The lizard-like beings decided to genetically modify another race to fight their wars for them. Originally called Orcs, these green-skinned beings are a fusion between animal and fungus cells, allowing them to reproduce asexually. Even after the collapse of the civilization of brain boys that created them, Orcs, now called Orcs, still wage war against literally everyone, even each other. The Orcs were created with a desire to fight, low intelligence, and subconscious reality warping that allows Orcs to shape reality based on their collective beliefs. Through their reality warping, Orcs can build technology that functions even if it shouldn't, and apply rules to the battlefield based on colors. Once upon a time, there was a titan named Orgrimmar. Orgrimmar wished to conquer the world of Draenor, which was at the time consumed by a race of plants called the Evergrowth. While I personally would have picked an easier world to conquer, Orgrimmar was dead set on destroying the Evergrowth and taking the planet for himself. Orgrimmar built a kaiju-sized golem named Grond to wipe out the Evergrowth, but Grond ultimately failed. The individual pieces that made up Grond's body took up a life on their own and continued the fight, yet even they were destroyed, yet new beings arose from their corpses much the same, and so on and so forth. These races born from Grond are collectively referred to as breakers, and the smaller races of breakers had their bodies changed by the Evergrowth. The spores of the Evergrowth transmuted the smaller breakers from stone to flesh, making them weaker and easier to kill in comparison. The smallest of the breakers were the ogres, and from the ogres evolved the orcs. The breakers eventually defeated the Evergrowth and initially set up a caste system based upon how close the individual was to Grond, although this all changed when the ogres had an uprising. While there was about a millennia of peace between the two races, sure enough ogres and orcs went to war. The ogres eventually destroyed their own empire during the aforementioned war due to the use of a spell gone wrong, and from then on the orcs would dominate Draenor. Orc society heavily revolves around shamanism. Shamans in orc society serve the purpose of communicating with elemental spirits. These shamanistic practices eventually lead to demonic corruption, but this segment has already gone on long enough. Let's just get to our next world. In the ancient past of Middle-earth, there was a being known as Eru Elevator, who created the world itself. Eru Elevator also created the Ainur, beings originally meant to guide the denizens of Middle-earth into the ways of Eru Elevator. One such Ainur, however, decided he wanted Elevator's power for himself. Said Ainur became to be known as Morgoth. Morgoth needed his own army to fight against all who opposed him, so he abducted some stranded Eldar and experimented upon them, turning them into the first Uruk. Uruks, or orcs as they would be later called, come in many varieties, big and small. Some orcs are even half-human, bred by Saruman, a man I greatly admire for his ambition and willingness to improvise. Orcs became the go-to servant for any Dark Lord in the history of Middle-earth since their very inception, as they are all cannibals who have little desires outside of committing violence. Of the many conflicts between the various races of Mer in Nirn's history, few have had a greater impact than the exodus of the Chimera. The conflict between the Chimera and the Aldmer was so great that God stepped in. Trini Mac, one of the most popular Mer gods, opposed the Chimera, and Boethia, one of the Daedric gods the Chimera worshipped, did battle with Trini Mac. Boethia ultimately won in said conflict, and devoured Trini Mac. Rather than gaining his powers or anything like that, Boethia defecated out the remains of Trini Mac, but the latter wasn't dead. Trini Mac was reborn as the Daedric prince Malakath, and all of Trini Mac's followers up to that point were transformed into the breed of mare we now called the Orcimmer. The Orcimmer were then heavily discriminated against for much of Tamriel's history, branded as orcs. While Trini Mac was previously the mare god of strength, Malekatha's primary purpose is the patron of the ostracized, though he is still associated with strength and war. And before we move on to the last type of orc for today, please note I made a video about a creature that would definitely not be safe to talk about on YouTube, lest the community guidelines police hunt me down. So I placed the video on my Ko-fi for free, the link being in this video's description. And while you are on Ko-fi, please consider donating. I have an army of monsters I plan to build and need funds to hire creature designers to create them for me. And finally, we are now moving on to perhaps one of the least well-known versions of orcs I've encountered. Near the beginning of the cosmos, the gods fought against the primordials for control, in a war now known as the Dawn War. One of the earliest gods to join this Dawn War was Grumsh, and one of the gods that joined later was Corellon. Despite being there much shorter, Corellon was more liked by the other gods than Grumsh, and as such most of the land in the various worlds of the material plane that were originally supposed to go to Grumsh, instead went to Corellon to fill with the race of his own creation, the elves. Grumsh had nowhere to place the race he had created, the orcs, and it sent the god into a fury. Grumsh then struck a deal with Lolth, then wife of Corellon, to eliminate Corellon. Lolth laid a curse of fragility on Corellon's sword and told Corellon that Grumsh had planned on signing a peace treaty. Grumsh of course had no such plans and was intent on killing Corellon. The fight did not go Grumsh's way as Corellon managed to reassemble his blade and gouge out one of Grumsh's eyes. Grumsh One Eye, as he is now called, became even more furious and declared the orcs go to eternal war with the elves and anyone who stands with them, and that orcs should conquer everything. Orcs from then on became a society of nomadic raiders, who respect strength and raid anyone weaker than them for supplies. Despite their barbaric nature, orcs are actually among the least xenophobic races in existence, regularly allowing giantkin such as ogres and etins to join their warbands, as well as any other strong brutish race such as Minotaurs. Grumsh demands of his followers to breed whenever possible to offset the high mortality rates, and as such orcs are known to sexually assault the non-elven races they raid, creating what are known as half-orcs. The one thing that unites all orcs, no matter the universe, is their love of violence. It doesn't matter if the world's orcs believe in honor or not, orcs love war. This makes orcs perfect blunt force minions for any dark lord or scheming nobleman. I personally do not know if I am willing to use orcs in any capacity. There are many strong and powerful monsters out there, so why use the most basic? I guess it is up to my trusty viewers to decide, who should have all subscribed by now if they enjoy my content. Until next time, I'm Dr. Searchlight, vanishing into the dark.